Hello and welcome to this Java tutorial. So in this chapter, we'll start with object-oriented programming in Java, and we'll learn about what is object-oriented programming, and then we'll move on to learn about what is class, what is object, which are the building blocks of object-oriented programming. Okay, so we'll start with object-oriented programming, then move on to how to create a class, how to create an object of that class in Java. So we'll see some examples, but we'll start with some introduction about object-oriented programming. So object-oriented programming actually is a paradigm of application development where programs are built around objects. That's the name, right? Object-oriented, the programming which is oriented towards objects and how these objects interact with each other. So you won't only focus on functions or logic as you will do in a procedural language like C. With object-oriented programming, you will emphasize on modeling the real-world entities as objects, right? Which makes your program more intuitive, modular, and easier to maintain. So object-oriented programming contains objects, right? These are the fundamental building blocks in OOPS. So your application is actually a collection of many objects which interact with each other to perform some tasks. For example, suppose you have to create a banking system. So you will start thinking what you will have in a bank. You will have customer, right? So you'll start thinking of some entities. So you'll have some customers. So you'll create a customer class. Then those customers will have account. So you'll have an account class. Then the account may be of different types, maybe of saving account or current account. So that's how you start breaking your system into some entities, and those entities will have some attributes and some operations. That is how you will think in object oriented, or you can say that's how you will take an object oriented approach, which is more intuitive, right? If you start thinking like this. So these are the advantages of object-oriented programming. It is simple because you are modeling the real world entities. So it is more intuitive and faster to develop. Again, if you see, right, if we see any person, we think of some behavior or some properties of that person, right? That this person is more talkative, this person is lazy, this person is very intelligent. Or suppose you have a teacher, right? You may think, okay, this teacher has a very interesting approach of teaching. Another teacher does not have a very interesting approach for teaching. Then you will have some operations, right? For teacher, it will be they'll teach, they'll give some homework. So that is what you can put in a teacher class, right? Some features, name, age, and operations. Teach, give homework. Or in a car, you may look for the properties like sunroof is there or not, right? Engine is at least 2000 cc. Then for operations, it may have when you press start button, it should start. When you shift gear, then it should move forward, or if you shift reverse, then it should go in reverse. So these will be the operations for the car. And same way, you can break these entities in smaller components, right? Within a car, you may have engine that will have its own properties and operations. Gearbox, it will have its own properties and operations. And collectively, it is your car project, right? So that's how you start thinking in terms of entities, breaking your project into smaller entities, which will have some properties and some operations. So that is how you will model your classes using object-oriented programming. And that is why it is more intuitive. Then another feature is extensible. Because of inheritance and composition, you can add new functionality to an existing class by extending that class. So you can extend your class and add new feature to it. Then reusability also. So if you have created a class, since each class is self-contained, means it will have its own properties and behavior. That means it will have its own variables and the methods. So properties you can think of as variables. Operations means methods of the class. Everything will be in the same class. Each class you have to create as a self-contained class. So if you need the same functionality somewhere else, then you can use the same class. Modifiable, since each class is self-contained, so if you make any changes in the data or the procedures in an OO program, again, variable or methods of that class, if you change, that will not affect any other part of a program, because the data and the method are in the same class. So you are changing that class only, should not affect theoretically any other part of your program. So modifying your class is easy that way. So these are some advantages of object oriented programming. Now coming to a class. Okay, so if you see in object oriented terms, class provides a blueprint for the individual objects. So using class, you will create, right, behavior and operations. But when you have created a class, that is only a file in itself. It is just a .java file residing on your disk. On its own, it does not do anything. If you have to do something using that class, then you have to create objects of that class. So you can say that each class defines a new data type, and each object is a variable of that data type. So to understand it better, we have primitive data type and user defined data type in Java. So primitive types are that, right, int, byte, short, long, double, where it is already predefined what you get with that particular type. So suppose I use int I, right? So Java knows that I is of type int. That means it will only store a number. That is one thing, right? Number, and that won't be more than 4 bytes, right? So that is already defined. That is why it is a primitive data type. Now if you create your own type, right, that is a class, then when you create object, then only it will create something for that class in memory. Before that, it is just a Java file, nothing more. So we'll see with the one class here. Suppose I have this class, right, where I've given double length, double width. Now when you create object of that class using new, that is how to create, right? We have already created classes. That's what we have done right from the beginning. Everything we have done in class, we have created some object on also actually. Now we are going into the depth of what it actually means. So when you create like this, right, this is your class, this is object, and then you use new and class name again with round brackets, then only it will create some place in the memory or space in the memory where it will assign space for this length and width. So if it is double, that means 8 bytes and 8 bytes, right? 16 bytes it will assign. So that's how you can visualize. So you'll create object which will reference some memory where you'll have place to store length, place to store width, and whatever methods you have, that also it will store. So that there is a method area, metadata, all that will be stored there, all your class metadata. Now actually it is meta space. So there you'll have all the information about those methods, how they are mapped to these particular variables. Using that, you will be able to access them through this object, right? So main thing is only with object you can use the class, not on its own. On its own, it is just a file created in your hard disk. And as we have already discussed, each class will have some attributes and operations. If we take this class, customer class, suppose in banking system, then it may have these variables, right? Name, address, email, phone number, and some methods, display customer details, change contact details. So here you will access all these variables and display their value. In change contact detail, you may give a facility to change address, email, and phone number, these three, right? So that is how you'll have many methods. All this will be in the same customer class, so that it is a self-contained class with everything about customer in it. So that is the idea of a class. Now when you have created a class, you will create a instance of that class, which is called the object. Object will store its state in fields and expose its behavior through methods. Once you have object, then only you can have some value in those fields which you have created through class, and you will use those methods. Again, same thing, classes are logical. They don't really exist in real world. That is what I was trying to explain. Only when you create object, then you have some physical thing, you can say, in the memory, some physical entity which can actually do something. So once, if we take the same example in banking system, to create a customer class, then you can have many customer object representing many customers of a bank, and then they may be associated with some account. So you'll have account class with account objects, right? So that is how you'll have interaction between those objects. So before going to any other theory, let's try to create a class. Okay, so for that, let's understand first how a class will look like. So you'll create a class using class keyword and then some name of that class. Then if you have any variable within the class, not in any method, then those are instance variables. So I'll come to that, what you mean by instance variables. So they'll have their type and then name. So string, name, int, age, like that, right? Type, string or int or whatever, and then name of the variable. Then you can have a constructor of a class which is used to initialize, and some methods of the class, right? So we'll do an example step by step. First, we'll define a class with some instance variable also. So that way you will understand also how a class evolves, why you should have those things which you have in a class, right? So for creating the class, I've created a new package actually. This is the name com.netjstack.training.oops. Now I'm giving a proper package name. Within that, I'll create our new class. Let's take it as that customer only, customer class, and it won't have the main method. And just to keep it simple, I'll have only two fields. So two variables, name, and to have some variety, I'll have a age with int. So one of type string, one of type int. We start with a simple structure of the class. In the beginning, I'll just have these two fields in it, nothing else, right? And then I'll create another class to actually use this, which I'll name customer driver. That will have the main method. Here I'll have to create the object customer class. So let's say customer equal to new customer. Okay. Now using that, I can access and give some name, age. Then if I have to show them, then I can use out. Here I can say name plus customer dot name plus age dot age, right? Then I can run it. So at runtime, it will create object of this class, then it will assign these values, and it will print that when I say customer dot name, customer dot age, it will print those. If I want, I can create two object, name it one. So here also I have to use one and one. And let's say copy it again, create another object, two. 2 and 2. Here it will be 1. So some other name. And display those. Right. So I get 2. Right. So I have two objects of that class. Both are printed. How you can visualize them is like this. I create one object, right? And say it is just one, let's say, and another object. That will be just two. This will refer to its own memory with its own name, right? And age. This will have its own memory when we use new with its own name and age. So each instance has its own variable. That is why the name instance variables. So these are actually instance variables, name and age. Each object gets its own instance of these fields. That's how you can think of it. First one has its own name and age. First two has its own name and age. That is why when we say cust1 dot name, I get this name. Cust1 dot age, I get this. Cust2 dot name, I get this customer name. Cust2 dot age, I get this age. That is what you mean by instance variables. Now within this program, of course, it is very basic right now, and what we have done is not how you will actually write it. So now we'll start making changes to it. So when I showed the class structure, right, there one thing was that it will have instance variable type and name of the variable. So for now, if you see, that is what we have done. In our class, we have instance variables, type and variable name. Then most of the logic is here itself in another class. Now, as I said, that is the first attempt, which is still not correct. So first change is, as per object oriented principles, actually, data should not be manipulated by any other class. You have some data here, these variables. Methods of this class only should be able to manipulate the data, not any other entity. Right now, we have another class, this class, which is able to access these data, change it. Right here only we are giving name. That may lead to many problems. So first thing we have to fix that. For that, actually, you use access modifiers. So for that, I'll create another video. For now, we have these access modifiers, right? Private, public, default, and protected. And private is more restricted. So we need the most restricted one, right? So it should be private, so that no other class can access it. So as soon as we create it as private, you go there, you will start getting error here, right? That it is not visible anymore, which is what we want also. So we should not be able to change it from here, right? Another thing is, if you see, we are writing the same thing again and again. And as I said many times when we were discussing this class, that class should be self-contained. It should have the fields and operations. We can bring this operation also in the class itself, where we display this data. That is our second change. And that should be accessible from other classes also. This we can make as public. It does not return anything, so void and display customer details, right? Now we need those details. So again, this is second attempt. So let's do it this way for now. I'll write something here, string n int a, right? Then I'll give name equal to n. I can assign here age equal to a, and then I can show, or I can copy from here itself this part and bring it here. Name and age. Now from here, when we call, then only we have to send. So I can remove this part. Suppose I still want to object. So customer one dot display customer details. Here I can give, right, and name, age directly. No double quotes needed for that. Same thing again here. This I'll take here. This, let's say, keep everything same. All right. And this will be, I still get the same thing, and now this is much leaner. My code has moved here in this class. So now class has instance variable as well as some methods which are accessing this data. Now we are accessing the data from here only. But still, if you see this part, that is not you should do in each method. You get value and then you assign it to these variables and then you print it. What you can do is actually in a class, there is a constructor also. So while creating the object itself, you can initialize it if you want. You can give values here itself. So what you use for that is a constructor, which is kind of a special method which has the same name as the class. So it will have a same name as the class. It has no return type, not even void. And you'll create it like this. Here only I can give the values. And convention is you use the same variable name as you have here. So it will have the same name here and this here. Now I can delete from here everything because we don't need that. We'll make changes here also. Now I'll start getting error here because this we are passing parameter is not needed anymore. But in constructor, what you will do is this is constructor. These are instance variables, correct? What you can do is we have this keyword is there. Using that you can access this side, this dot name. Again, I'll create a separate video to explain what is this keyword. For now, you just take it like this, because if I start explaining everything here itself, we'll lose focus from class and object and it will become very big. So that is how you can create a constructor of a class. Is this dot name equal to name, this dot age equal to age. So this side actually is this name, this side is this name, local variable name. This is this instance variable which is accessed using this, right? Now what you can do is you can bring this to here itself. While creating object only, you can pass the values. Name, int age, name, age. Same thing here. Still, if you see, everything is correct. Now I can create thousands of objects of the same class. So this gives as a blueprint how my object will look like. Then I can create many objects of this class. So each will have its own instances, right? Like this. So when we are creating, then only we are giving the value. So name will go as this value. It will assign this. So that's what it will store here. Here it will store this as age. Here another name. And if we create another object, customer 3, that will have its own memory and so on. Name and age. So that is how you create a class that is now a better structure what we started with. In comparison to that, if you see, this is a better structure. Now we have instance variable, constructor and method, and I tried to go step by step so that you also understand why we have to do this all, why we can't do as we did in the beginning itself, right? So it should be private. That is one object oriented principle encapsulation. So this class itself should have the data and the methods which work on that data. Then the methods, and you initialize it using constructor. All right. So that is our class. Now if we bring our focus to the object creation. What we have done here, right? This. So it has actually three distinct parts, which we do generally like this. All we will bring in one line only, but it has three things actually. First is declaration. Declare a variable of class type. I can just do it like this. Suppose take another one, customer and customer 3. So this is the declaration part. I have just declared a variable with nothing in it. So right now, if you see, is not referencing to anything. So I've created one object, right? Customer 3. But it is just there, that object. It is not referencing to anything. Right now, it is null actually. That is the declaration. Then instantiation. To assign it to the variable created in its step 1. Instantiation is if I do take this object and use new to create a new instance, right? This is instantiation. That is when actual allocation of the memory happens. So that is when your instance start pointing to a memory which has been given space to store name and age in our example, right? So because you have used new keyword here, that means you are creating a new instance of this class. So that is the instantiation phase. Then what you do is initialization. When you write like this, right, class name followed by parenthesis, that is when you are calling the constructor of the class. That is why constructor has the same name as the class, right? If you see any other method also, you class, you call like this, right? Method name and then parenthesis. That is why you have parenthesis here after the class name, because it has to call the constructor which has the same name as the class name. That is when you can give the values of the fields. You want to initialize that object. That's what we want to do here. So I can give some values for name and age. So these are the three steps you do when creating object: declaring the object, instantiating an object, and initialization of the object. Generally, you do all these three in one line like this. Just to explain, I've created like this. Then using that object, I can call the method of the class, which will give me detail for the third customer, right? So these are the steps for creating object of the class. Now, object also has some characteristics. It has identity. Each object is different from another because of the instance variable. So even if one object I create, let's say I create a third or fourth object, customer 4 and customer 4, which has the same detail as customer 2, but these two are separate objects. So name and age is same, but these are separate customers. So each object has its own identity. Then each object has a state which represents the current value of an object's attributes. So its state may change, right? As an example, suppose in account object, it may be an active state. You may have a state field which is active, or because of some rules that balance is less or not in use for some time, it may be in suspended state, right? Object has a state also, which is the current value of all the fields. Then it has behavior also, which is the methods, right? What object can do, that is defined by its behavior. So all the methods of the class which it can call. So these are the characteristics of an object. One more thing I wanted to tell about is how to identify potential classes in any requirement. So based on what we have done till now, if you have been given a requirement, how will you identify what all I can create as class from this requirement? So in any problem statement, if you have nouns, that means potential classes. If you have a requirement, right, that you have to create a banking application which will have customers and customers will have accounts. So you see two nouns, right, customer and account. You know, okay, I can create two classes for these two nouns. Then nouns that describe properties may become attributes. So within that, you may have requirement, right? That account will have to maintain some balance while opening an account. You will assign a account number and branch name. So these becomes fields, right? Branch name, account number, balance. Then you may also have requirement that from account customer can deposit or withdraw money. So here these deposit and withdraw are verbs. That means some operations or methods. So that is how by reading some requirement you will start gleaning these information, what stands as noun and can be mapped to a class, what can be taken as a property, and what are the verbs which can be implemented as methods of the class. All right, so that is all about class and object. Thanks for watching the video. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.